In this lesson, we'll look at a common object within any programming language, the variable. Variables and constants in ActionScript are very similar to those found in many other languages. A variable is basically a little piece of data that we're able to give a name to so that we can both assign values to that data and retrieve values from that data and serve as the basic building blocks to any program. So here we can see I have a class file already open, and what we're going to do is declare a variable. And to do that, normally this is done directly within the class itself, and the way we do it is we can declare that variable to be private or public or protected, depending upon our needs. Here we'll declare private. We'll use the keyword var, and that's going to declare the variable for us. And at this point, we give the variable an identifier or a name. So let's just call this number. And in ActionScript, we have to set this to a specific data type. And variables can be set to really any data type that you would want, but some of the basic ones are things like integers, arrays, strings, and so forth. So let's just set this to an integer, so int equals 1. Alright, so if we want to actually verify that this variable has been declared and its value set, we can go into our constructor function here, and we can trace this out. So trace, and what do we want to trace out? We want to trace out by the identifier, which is number. And to trace out within Flash Builder, we need to debug. If you're in Flash Professional, you don't need to debug, you can just test the movie and it'll trace it out just the same. So let's hit debug. Okay. So we can see in our console that it actually does trace out 1. So there are other ways to declare a variable. This is declaring a variable that's accessible throughout this entire class. But we can also declare variables that are only accessible within the function with which they are created. And to do that, you just declare it within the function itself. And you don't have to use private or protected or anything like that here. You just declare var, and let's just call this my string, and we'll data type that to a string and set it equal to some string. And the string that we set this to is totally up to us. It's just plain text. So let's just say number is equal to a semicolon and a space. So one thing that we can do here is we can actually concatenate both of these variables. So if we say my string plus number, and then debug once again, you can see that it actually does trace out in the console window, number is equal to 1. So it's taking a string, my string, it's taking an integer, number, and it's concatenating both of those into a string representation of that. One more thing before we stop talking about variables, and that is a special type of variable called a constant. A constant is a variable that you cannot change the value of. So any of these variables we've declared so far, we could easily change the value somewhere else. So if I were to go in here, and right before I do my trace, I set number equal to 23, and then debug once again, you can see that it's actually changed it from 1 to 23 because we told it to. That's a variable. If we actually make this a constant, we're going to say private const number. That will declare it as a constant. If we try to change it down here, the compiler is going to get angry with us. So you can see as soon as I save this, we get a little warning here, and if I go to my problems window, we can see there's an error. And what does it tell us? It tells us the illegal assignment to a variable specified as a constant. So it's telling us you can't do that. Once you define a constant's value, you cannot change it. One other thing with constants is normally constants are used with uppercase to distinguish them from basic variables. So we'll make that change here. And let's actually change the value of this to something else. 45 in this case. And if I debug one more time, we can see that number is equal to 45. So in this case, concatenating a variable and a constant. So using variables within your program allows you to store specific pieces of data for use later on within your application. So in this lesson, we've seen how to create variables and constants, assign them with data, and use them throughout our application.